Beloveds, today we are joined by current and former members of the UCC Disability Ministries Board. We have Becca Marin Anderson, Reverend Kim, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, and Reverend Laura Kanata. And we're digging deeper still into chapter 5 of the Building Up a New World Congregational Organizing for Transformative Impact. This book was our all church read this year, and we'll put that link into chat on how you can access that curriculum. And so, beloveds, it is so good to have you on the screen today. Kim, before we get started, I'm going to ask you, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Sholin.
Sholin. Hi,
Yeah,
Sholin.
Sholin. I think that it probably had some umlauts in there somewhere, but when we came to America, those disappeared and it became whatever it was going to be.
Whatever it is, it's perfect
Yeah.
for you. How's your soul today, Reverend Kim?
Oh, my soul is doing okay. I'm also living that cold and flu season life. But other than that, no complaints. So glad to be here with you all.
Oh, good to be here with you as well. Thank you. Reverend Laura, how's your soul today?
I would say it's content. It's not super, super high. It's not super, super low. It's just kind of chilling.
Nice. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. Considering where you are geographically in the world, kind of chilling is good. So there you
Yeah.
go. And Becca, how is your soul today?
Thanks, Ellie. I would say my soul is settling. I've had a couple of days where there's been a lot of things that are not emergencies that people have been treating like emergencies, and I'm just really trying to remind myself and those around me that urgency culture is not a thing that I need to subscribe to. So, working on settling in.
Oh my God, amen. And once you figure out how to settle in, if you can give any hints or tips to the rest of us, please do. Because, yeah, we do very, very important work, right? But
Mhm.
fortunately or unfortunately, at least in my case, it's not life-saving work. It's soul-giving work, I hope, anyway. So,
Mhm.
it is so good to be here with you all. One of the things that when I first read this book, about a year or so, well, probably 2 years ago now, and we were planning to have conversations with local conferences and associations throughout the UCC. We ended up landing on, with the help of Join the Movement with Reverend Dr. Vilda Love and Dr. Sharon Fenema, to move the book actually from that individual trying to reach out to conferences and associations to engage in, to making it the all church read. And in that, the chapter that stood out as the most important for me is chapter 5, talking about disability justice, talking about disability in our congregational context. And so I'm curious from your perspectives, if you can share a little bit about the history of the term disability justice.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a term that we use in a lot of different contexts now, right? That when we are talking about any kind of movement or actions that have to do with disability, oftentimes the term that we're using is disability justice. But we feel it's really important to talk about the fact that this is actually a very specific framework that has a specific history. It was created by queer and trans BIPOC disabled activists and articulated by the arts and activist collective Sins Invalid. And we'll talk a little bit more about the history of disability justice movement. But in order to understand that, we actually need to start by talking about the disability rights movement, because those two things are very much related. But understanding kind of the difference between them will help us understand why disability justice is so specific.
The disability rights movement was an activist movement in the latter part of the 20th century, which focused on passing civil rights legislation to protect people with disabilities. The successes of this movement include the full implementation of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. While these landmark protections have changed a lot for people with disabilities, there's a lot that they don't do. and a lot of people for whom they do not work. The ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, is enforced primarily by lawsuit. When you experience discrimination on the basis of disability, you can sue to force the person or entity to comply with the ADA. However, this means that if you do not have the money, time, or resources to sue, or if you have reason to believe that you won't be treated fairly in a court of law, lawsuit is not a good option. This means in practice that the people most protected by the ADA are straight, white, rich, cisgender, men with visible physical disabilities. Even everyone else is usually not in a position to sue or knows that their concerns are likely to be minimized or dismissed. This is no surprise given that the leaders of the disability rights movement were primarily straight, white, cisgender men who were wheelchair users. They advocated for solutions that would protect them and did not take seriously the objections of the women, BIPOC, queer, and trans folk, and people with other kinds of disabilities in their community.
In response, BIPOC, queer, and trans disabled folk created disability justice, an intentionally intersectional framework that centers the experiences of the most marginalized and seeks non-legislative, community-based solutions to the problems of ableism.
And thank you for that. I know, just from my own personal background prior to becoming a pastor, is working around disability education, disability rights in educational settings and stuff with a focus on autism. And one of the things that I recognized that was so important during a lot of the civil rights movement work, and that not often talked about, is it was that legal groundwork by the disability advocates that helped to set the framework for the other movements that were happening. It was like when we talk about court cases, right? We talk about precedent. Oh, is there a precedent for that? It was all of that long, tenuous activism by disability rights advocates to help lay that groundwork to produce some of the successes that we see, or that we got to see, some got to see, and many got to experience in the civil rights movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think one thing that is important to note is, like, we're not saying that the disability rights movement didn't do important things, but that, no one movement can do everything. And so, disability rights established some very important, like you said, precedent and things that we really need to continue to have. And disability justice kind of takes another look at it and says, what are other approaches that we can use that might bring in more communities and further this work that a lot of disability rights activists, I think, also were in favor of, but in their time and in their context, were only able to do so much.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. I think a lot of people, before I started studying this stuff, assumed that the ADA solved everything.
Yeah.
And it's got, oh, you have the ADA, so you're good now, is what a lot of able-bodied people, and what I assumed until I started traversing the world outside of my parents' home and was like, wait a minute. So the ADA says a bathroom has to have so many square foot, but if it's all in a line, so I have to park my wheelchair between me and my PCA, how are they going to help me get on the toilet? It meets the ADA requirements, but it's not accessible. And that's the kind of stuff that people don't see sometimes.
Right. And religious institutions are void of those ADA rules.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they're exempt.
Kim, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just saying, yep, that's the most frustrated yep ever.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating. I want to ask one kind of follow-up question is, I find it interesting. What I didn't know is, and if you could repeat it again, you said that there was an arts and activist collective that was, can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think art will save the world.
Hmm.
Oh, if you have
Oh,
not looked up Sins Invalid
yeah.
yet,
I think we put a link. Was that one of our links
I
to
know
Sins
we
Invalid?
I know we linked to their 10 Principles of Disability Justice and
And if you just,
also to their larger disability justice guide, Skin, Tooth, and Bone, the
Mhm.
basis of our movement is our people. Um, and but yeah, like they have so many things that they do. I
Beautiful work.
believe most recently, I think they were doing a ABC's Book of Disability, if I remember correctly. I know they do a lot of performances. There's a lot of wheelchair dancing and a lot of theater productions that come out of there. Um, one of the leaders, Leroy Moore, is a hip hop artist, is a disabled man who created Crip Hop Nation. So yeah, they're very much a group that's both, coining and articulating this movement of disability justice and living it out through practicing art and furthering their activist principles by making art. And yeah, I think I would agree with you, Ellie, and I think they would agree with you that art will save the world.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like when you can doubt, when everything else you can doubt, you can add some kind of like art tells the truth despite itself, right?
Hmm.
Like even AI created imagery tells the truth about something, right? Which is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. Because it scares me. At any rate, thank you for elaborating on that, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more. But I'm really curious. So you gave us a brief history of the term disability justice, but I know that I would like to know more. What is distinctive about this particular framework? In the work to move forward, to be accessible and open to all.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is talk about the 10 principles of disability justice. So this is the framework that Sins Invalid created to explain what disability justice is and how we live it out. So these are 10 principles that if you're doing your best to follow them, you're probably doing disability justice. So we will talk about them one at a time and give some examples of how they can be practiced, how you can live them out, and also talk about ways in which we have seen or ourselves failed to live into them because another important part of any sort of disability work is recognizing that perfection is not the goal and not achievable. And if we can't talk about the ways in which we don't live up to our ideals, we're not going to be able to live further into them. So the first principle of disability justice is intersectionality. And the way that Sins Invalid describes this is with the Audre Lorde quote, "We do not live single issue lives." And they then go on to say, ableism coupled with white supremacy, supported by capitalism, underscored by heteropatriarchy, has rendered the vast majority of the world invalid. And so what that basically means is we need to acknowledge that when we're gathering and doing disability work, we cannot pretend that disability is the only aspect of our identity that we are bringing into this work. We have to be aware of and uh, really living into and acknowledging all of the intersecting aspects of our identity that are showing up with us. So one example of how an organization could live into that would be, if a disability organization is planning a protest or some sort of event where they think that police might be present, they're going to, not assume that everybody who might be going to this event or protest is going to have the same relationship with policing. They might particularly check in with their BIPOC and queer and trans members about how they feel, where they want to be, how they want to be kept safe. So that's going to really impact how they think about the things that they plan in their movement. And a way that I've personally seen this fail, when I was in seminary, I helped run the Disability Justice Caucus at my seminary. And despite our best efforts, it was a pretty white group of people who showed up in that space. And even though we knew very well that there were disabled BIPOC students at our school who we wanted to support, um, and I I can't I can't be certain exactly what we did that made people not feel like this space was for them. But I am sure that we did, that we best intentions, but if you can't if you can't show people that you believe in intersectionality, that you're going to welcome every part of who they are and understand that all of those things are going to affect what they need, they're not going to be in your space.
There we go. The next one is the leadership of those most impacted. We are led by those who know these systems. And that quote is from Aurora Levins Morales. And this one I think is one of my favorites of the 10 principles, just because it is I think essential to any movement that those who are the most impacted by an issue or something should be the ones at the helm. So this would keep us, if you remember from last week and we talked about the different models, this would keep us out of the realm of charity model if we have people who are leading from a disabled perspective. And so I love it. And it underscores the disability rights, I guess, motto of nothing about us without us. That is so important that and I'm sorry I'm not being so articulate. My ear is plugged and that's all I can think about right now. But but the it's absolutely important, like the most important. So if your church is going to be say you are interested in going for A2A, accessible to all designation through UCC Disabilities Ministries, then you'd better make sure that you've got some folks who are disabled that are leading that committee anytime that any of this work is being done, because that's what makes sure that what we are doing is needed, that it is addressing all the correct things, and that we are not just offering charity, but we are truly creating inclusive and whole places to worship.
The next principle is anti-capitalist politic. In an economy that sees lands and humans as components of profit, we are anti-capitalist by the nature of having non-conforming body minds. Disabled people push back on the Puritan work ethic idea that you are only good if you produce. So there's the, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the deserving poor, there's all these different principles, and having a disabled body mind pushes back on that. The way I see this in work is really when we talk about Imago Dei, or being, we are good because we are children of God. We are good because we exist, and we don't have to earn. Society says we have to earn the right for food and water and shelter, but that's not what this principle is about. This principle is a direct no to that concept. And I think it's really hard to be anti-capitalistic in a capitalistic world. And I know I don't even have any concrete examples. I just know, you can't say, well, I'm not going to work for money because then you won't eat tonight. So you have to, but I did a sermon on capitalism and billionaires and stuff just recently. And what I talked about was how it's not about not spending money, because unfortunately we have to spend it, but it's on how you spend your money. Do you go to a chain restaurant or a mom and pop restaurant? Do you, that kind of stuff. And that's just not necessarily disability related, but it is, because it's all intersectional.
Absolutely. So the fourth principle is commitment to cross-movement organizing, shifting how social justice movements understand disability and contextualize ableism. Disability justice lends itself to politics of alliance. Disability justice understands that all social justice movements are necessary and important to the dismantling of all the isms. So basically, the one way that I would sum up this principle is it's anti-oppression Olympics. If you've ever been in a space where it felt like different social justice activists were competing with one another for the attention of an organization or for their priorities to be put in the strategic plan. This is a principle that is really trying to push back on that and say we actually have to support all social justice movements in order for anything to happen for ours as well. Um, so that's going to mean that a activist committed to disability justice in a situation like that is going to try to take a step back and say, like, how can we incorporate all of the priorities that we have into this plan? How can we make a event or a whatever we're doing at our organization that takes seriously all of the justice concerns that we have here? One way that I've seen this in practice, the one of the organizations that I work for, we actively spend time speaking up for trans rights and racial justice issues, especially lately, because we're paying attention to who are the people who are most under attack right now. And it includes disabled people, but it also includes people who are not part of disability communities, but who are marginalized and are seeking justice. And in order to be a disability justice organization, we believe that we need to be participating in those movements as well. Ways that I've seen it fail. Earlier this year, there was a threat to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is one of the landmark disability civil rights pieces of legislation. And I won't get into it because it's complicated, but it hinged around trans rights. Basically, it was an attack on disabled people via trans people. And there was a lot of temptation in certain disability circles to say, well, we can solve this problem by just abandoning the trans folks. Like if we just say transness has nothing to do with disability, then we can keep Section 504. And luckily, I don't think that was the predominant feeling in the community, and that isn't what ended up happening. It kind of just sort of got quietly dropped. But that's the kind of thing that can happen if you're not committed to cross-movement organizing, is that temptation to say, well, like, this group isn't us, and therefore if it's inconvenient for us to support them, we won't.
The next principle is recognizing wholeness. People have an inherent worth outside of commodity relations and capitalist notions of productivity. Thank goodness, right? Each person is full of history and life experience, and each person has their own strengths and weaknesses and their own unique facets. Now, when I think about this one, especially in relation to the church, I think of a really worn out phrase that I would love if everybody that is here today would just drop from their vocabulary, and that is talking about broken people. I have never in my life met a fragment of a human. Even on their worst day, even dealing with like the worst pain someone's ever dealt with, or, the worst mood or anything, the person in front of me has always been an entire person, a whole human. And so this principle of disability justice recognizes the inherent wholeness of every single person, no matter what they are dealing with one day or another or anything like that. And so I would love it if we'd all just drop the whole broken people thing, because we are all, every single person is whole and is loved by God. Um, and so within disability justice, it's really important to also remember that and recognize that, because I think, again, operating from the charity model that we acknowledge exists a lot in churches, we can often go into weird savior complexes or things like that when we don't recognize and see the inherent wholeness of all of God's creation. Um, so that's what I've got to say about that. Please drop broken people from your vocabulary. Thanks. That's my own PSA. I went off script for that, but that's where we're going today. Yay.
The next principle is sustainability. We pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long term. Our embodied experiences guide us toward ongoing justice and liberation. And what that reminds me of is boundary setting. Sometimes you have to say no. Like, we can't individually save the world, right? And so, even though a lot of us are ministers and think, kind of, sort of, maybe, but so just recently I told someone I only have so many usable hours in a day. I support the issue that you are talking about, but I can't actively work on this particular issue at this minute in my life. Doesn't mean I can't in the future, but I can't right now. And that's something that sometimes you have to do, because I think if you don't practice those boundaries and that sustainability, you get burnout, and then you can't help anyone or yourself or anyone else. Kind of like the airplane thing, when you put your oxygen mask on first and then the next person's. And that's kind of how this sustainability option works in my mind.
All right, so principle number 7. I know we're just going through these, but again, there's a sheet from Sins Invalid that you can reference these on as well. So number 7 is commitment to cross-disability solidarity. We honor the insights and participation of all our disabled community members, knowing that isolation undermines collective liberation. This movement has no hierarchy, and no one disabled person knows the experiences of all. So I think we were actually talking about this last week, weren't we, Laura? The Little People of America example.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in some disability spaces, and I know that this is true in other social justice groups as well, there can often be this implicit, sometimes explicit, but usually implicit hierarchy of who gets to be the leaders in these spaces, who gets attention from the press, who do people think is someone worth paying attention to, and who do they kind of dismiss off of hand. And in disability spaces, historically, it's going to be people with physical disabilities that still leave them looking relatively quote unquote normal. So blind people, wheelchair users, people whose physical disabilities are apparent, so they have disability cred. So, we can demonstrate that we are in fact disabled, but also our appearance doesn't throw non-disabled people off too much. And so that can be extremely damaging to people with other kinds of disabilities, people with invisible disabilities, people with more significant physical disabilities, people with different types of speech patterns can often be really dismissed in disability spaces. And so a commitment to cross-disability solidarity is saying, we're really going to work on pushing back against that. We recognize that everyone's disabled experience is different and that everyone is going to be bringing particular wisdom and insight from their disabled experience. And we are not complete as a movement if we are not honoring and uplifting all of those experiences. So one way that this gets lived out is that disability justice organizations will often have a pretty comprehensive list of access practices that they use in every gathering. You can find some examples of these sorts of things in materials in the A2A process. And disability justice organizations are also going to be always asking people to bring their access needs to leadership if they're not already being met. That we're understanding that like we are trying to prepare for as many different needs as we can, and we're going to miss some. And so we want to know what we're missing so that we can provide as much access as we can so that everybody with regardless of what disabilities they have can be present in our spaces and participating as fully as they want to. And yet we're also still not going to be perfect at this. Again, not imperfection is part of the journey here. And I had an experience of probably more than a year ago now, where in a community that I was part of, a disability community that I was part of, there was a person with different speech patterns who spoke more slowly, who had some difficulty speaking, who got thoroughly talked over by another group of disabled people. And we did not notice that we had done that until she called us out on it. And that's something that as a group committed to cross-disability organizing, we have been working to do better at.
The next one is interdependence. We meet each other's needs as we build toward liberation, knowing that state solutions inevitably extend into further control over our lives. We take care of each other. We don't take control over each other. No. We take care of each other and offer mutual aid to prevent dehumanization of persons. I think interdependence is one of the harder ones for me. Having, been fully, bought and sold the whole independent, going to do everything by myself, not going to ask for help ever. And I think it might be a harder one to understand. But it's really important right now, especially at this time in US history that we are living currently, where there are more and more protections that are being taken away, not just for people with disabilities, but make the list, right? And so our survival is going to count on us being able to say, hey, I need some help. And others saying, oh yeah, I've got this. Let's take care of this with each other. I have seen this happen in my own life when my insurance has gotten real weird and I haven't had access to some medications, and I've had some friends who are in my own circle who are like, well, let me spot you, which it seems like a big no-no until you are without a medication that you absolutely need. And you have somebody who's like, I can get you a couple extra days till your insurance gets worked out. So and that's how I've seen it happen on a small scale, just me personally in my own life. And how we see this happen in bigger scale is mutual aid, where we are showing up for one another. Having issues that come up, pain flare-ups, where this was really a big thing during COVID, showing up for one another and helping out with the things that we can help out with, knowing that we may or may not be ever able to give back in the same way, but we will show up when we can for the next person who needs help. And there's a lot of community organizing that has formal mutual aid. And it is outside of government programs, which thankfully these exist, because the trust and faith in government programs is failing these days for a lot of things. So Yeah, I admit that I still do struggle on my own personal level with interdependence, just because it's like, well, I can't ever let anyone know I have a need. I can show up for other people, but I can't ever let other people know I need things. And so that it's not interdependence, it's independence and showing up for other people. And so I invite everybody with this one just to think about what our views are on giving help and receiving help and taking care of one another, and what seems like a weakness to you, and how that might be some internalized ableism and also some internalized capitalism. Blah.
Our ninth principle is collective access. Disability justice was founded by brown, Black, and queer-bodied disabled people and brings flexibility and creative nuance that go beyond able-minded, able-bodied normativity to be in community with each other. There are creative solutions to every accessibility challenge if we approach the problem together. There is no one way to meet the needs of our community at large. So, an example of collective access is thinking about who else is in the room or who might not be in the room and why they're not there. And that can go for disabled people to other disabled people, can go to able-bodied people to disabled people. It's just kind of being aware of your surroundings and such in a way. For example, when I started accessibility and making our church A to A accessible to all, I got, a ramp built, handicap buttons on the door, stuff that I needed. But there are other disabilities besides physical movement disabilities. So now the next project we're working on is getting a sign language interpreter for deaf people. And there aren't any deaf people at my church that I know of, but if we want them to come, we need to have something available. And so that's kind of an example of that. An example of not doing it well is I don't think that we do anything for people who are low vision right now. I think we have like the large print hymnal, maybe like a couple. But yeah, so that's something that we need to work on. And but again, it's not perfection, it's progress. And so we have a long list of things that we're grabbing from one column and grabbing from another column.
All right, and here is the 10th principle, and I think this one is last because it kind of sums up all the others, that all of the others are contained in this, I would say. Collective liberation. No body or mind can be left behind. Only moving together can we accomplish the revolution we require. So yeah, this is really everything. This is we practice collective access because we are moving towards collective liberation. We practice cross movement and cross disability solidarity because we are moving towards collective liberation. We are interdependent and anti-capitalist and centering the experiences of those most impacted in order to lead to liberation for all of us. And I was just very much reminded that that is very much at the center of a lot of justice movements. It's very much embodied in this webinar series. I mean, the song that starts out this webinar, "We will be free." That is the spirit of this principle, and I think it's just something to really remember. And I think about just the very direct and concrete ways in which our liberation really is bound up together. Um, something that I will always remember is I have a disabled friend of mine who would not in any way describe himself as a part of a social justice person. Is pretty moderate, is not comfortable with a lot of the social justice language that we use, but also said to me at the beginning of this year, when some very scary things were starting to happen, that he recognizes that even if those things are not impacting him personally, even if they are not, even the ones that are not impacting disabled people more generally, he needs to be worried about them, and he needs to be thinking about them, because remembering the Holocaust you there people will come for one group and it will not stop there. They will come for all of us. And so that's the that's the darker side of collective liberation, is that when anyone's liberation is under threat, all of ours is. But the positive side is that when we are working towards any of our liberation, if we are keeping this in mind and making sure that we are doing our best to bring everyone along with us, we will also get to a place where we all are free. And that is the 10 principles of disability justice.
Yeah, and I heard intersectionality and like in all of them, right?
Yes.
Like in every single one, it's, for us, for all of us, right? And I love to hear that, and Becca, what I found interesting is you had shared a couple times of where you had seen this fail.
Mhm.
And so these principles, this is going to be a really easy question, I know. These principles are great. They're great guidelines, goalposts, boundary setting, all of the things to help guide us, right? But what does it look like in practical sense? How is it that we can engage in these in our own lives? And then what does the net of forgiveness look like in that?
Yeah, no, I think that that net of forgiveness is so important, and it's both forgiveness of each other, but also very much forgiveness of ourselves. Like I feel like it's really important to name the ways that a group that I led failed to be intersectional, and to name the ways that a group that I led did not practice collective access, because when I stay silent about those things, I create shame in myself, and I risk leaving people with the impression that I am somehow perfect as a disability activist, which will then mean when I do inevitably mess up in a public way, it'll be all the more shocking and upsetting. Um, and so I think when we are able to name how we have not always lived into these principles the way that we would like to, um, it leaves the space for us to actually live into them better, rather than just trying to cover up the times that we haven't.
Yeah.
Kim, Laura, any other thoughts on practical living into these?
Well, just naming stuff that I remembered I was going to say and then didn't say is one thing. You, me, and Kim are all white people.
Yes.
And so we don't, as I think the intersectionality or anyway, it's just something to note, that might have been the people who volunteered to do this project, but maybe if we had more people in our cohort, and it doesn't mean we're not trying, but it doesn't mean, anyway, just like you said. So that's one thing, is that, but again, you have to forgive yourself and you have to keep trying. You can't, it's really easy to play the blame game and the pity game. Like, oh yeah, we're all just, white people are all just, but if you acknowledge it and then move forward to take steps and don't get stuck in the, well, I messed up, please forgive me, don't hate me. I already hate me or something like that.
Yeah.
But just this moving forward. And it's the same way with other people. I give a lot, I'm very graceful. Yeah, you're not graceful, but like give a lot of grace in my communities when I work with people, when I'm with friends and stuff. Sometimes that burns me out for strangers. So, like, if someone asks me a really dumb question, and contrary to what they tell you in school, there are some really dumb questions. But if it's asked at a church setting, I'm much more likely to be like, well, let's unpack why maybe that was an uncomfortable question or something. But if I'm out on the street, like going grocery shopping, and someone asks me a really dumb question, there's a good chance I'll do something very unpastoral like. Unpastoral like. Because I'm like, well, I already explained that 3 times today to someone that I care about. I don't know who you are. Go away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, during early part of our racial reawakening, right? In 2020, it's like white people go talk to white people,
Hmm.
right? Like don't be asking folks of color, don't be asking your disabled friends to go and teach and educate and all of that stuff. It's like learn the stuff you need to learn, and then know how you're the one who knows how to talk to your friends in your community. So then build that bridge and go that way for sure. Yeah, Kim, did you have anything with my really easy question?
No, I think that they both really summed it up really well. I think just remembering that as with any learning, there is going to be a learning curve. And so as you're learning the language and the unique topography of disability justice, there's going to be moments where you're going to flub up. I mean, it's going to happen. And it happens to those of us who, as you know, as we've talked about in this group here, where we're engaged with it all the time. And there's an ever evolving language, and the different things that are coming out all the time around it. So you're going to at some point use something that's outdated. You're going to say something, you're going to make a mistake. And it is in that grace of, of what we've been talking about here, of naming it. Like, we have done our best uh to do better, and we like what Laura pointed out, we're three white women that showed up here this morning, right? Or this afternoon. I've been in bed all day. It's still morning to me.
Amen.
um but making the acknowledgement, moving forward, instead of getting like mired into that like self-hatred and shame and, oh, I can't do this right, so I better not do it at all. I don't want to say anything for fear of saying the wrong thing. Like, say the thing, not the horrible thing, but just, engage with people and keep moving forward, and people, and keep reading and researching and doing all of the work and attending webinars like this, because the more that justice is a muscle, right? The more you exercise that justice muscle, the more you understand what's happening, and the easier it's going to be for you to, in theory, I hate exercise, but in theory, the easier it's going to be to interact with a lot of these principles that may seem like they might be more challenging, or you might mess up an awful lot and it might get embarrassing. But you know what? It's okay. You can be embarrassed for a moment if you mess up. It's fine.
It's fine, right? And I think
Yeah.
how you kind of push back on the language of brokenness, right? I push
Mm.
back on the language of unlearning. It almost as if it punishes learning. You can't unlearn, you
No,
literally
it's
cannot
there.
unlearn something. It's
Yeah.
there. You can
Yeah.
keep learning,
You
right?
can, yeah.
Mhm.
And so you can learn what it feels like in your body when your
Mhm.
body feels something, when you have done something to inadvertently harm someone, or somebody has inadvertently harmed you, and then move from there. But if we are so disconnected from how to regulate, ourselves in these
Mhm.
situations, and then, yeah, you can't unlearn it. Keep learning, right?
Keep learning.
Totally.
Push through. It's
Push
you're
through.
gonna you're gonna have like all the blood rush to your face, and your stomach's gonna flip flop, and you're gonna be fine like 10 minutes later. It's fine.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
fine. So I just want to give everybody a heads up. We're going to run about 8 minutes over. I have a few more questions that came through. And I think we touched on this a little bit last week, but somebody had asked, how is it that we can educate our kids, especially when they see somebody with a physical, like a disfiguring disability, something like within their facial or in their other parts of their body? How do we teach them about being blunt to learn easily if taught about disability types? Like
Yeah.
how do you teach kids?
So, one thing I'll note is there are so many great children's books about and by disabled people now. So I would definitely recommend that families look into those. Like I said, I think there are some children's books that Sins Invalid has made. There's also a book that I am not going to remember the name of, but I will look it up and make sure that it goes out in our resources. But it is a picture book about Dr. Kathleen Friel, who is a woman with cerebral palsy, who is an amazing researcher and scientist who I know and is awesome. And there is a picture book about her now. And so like you can have books that teach your kids about really amazing people with disabilities doing really amazing things that are not just like, this is how this person lives their life, or this is Helen Keller. But this is a currently living person who lives a full and complex life. In terms of those street encounters, it's definitely tricky because on the one hand, I don't want parents to give their kids the idea that it's not appropriate to talk about disability. And I've experienced this as a blind person, on the street with my cane, like people ask like, why is she doing that? Why does she have that? And so, I rather than just, saying, shush or don't say that, like I would steer kids towards a better way to ask the question. So if a kid says, why does that person look weird, you might say something like, weird is not something that we apply to how people look. But that person has a different structure of their face or their body, and some people just do. Emphasize for kids that bodily diversity and mental diversity and all these different things are normal and should be expected.
I think
Yeah.
there is, I know you said not unlearning, but so I don't know how to phrase it differently, so you can fill me.
Continual learning.
Continue learning. Okay, thank you. But there are some things that people learn that are inaccurate, and so you
Yes.
want to reframe that or learn over that. I don't know. But for example, when certain negative, like the example I talk about is representation. There's a really good author and a really good book I like, and the author's line is the stories we tell are the reality we create. So when you tell like the story about like Rumpelstiltskin, the tiny little angry man, and then someone sees a tiny person outside, now they're afraid they're going to kidnap them. Like, not as an adult, but when you're a little kid, that tiny man's going to take me away and he's going to stamp his feet. Or if the villain in all the movies has a scar on their face or walks with a limp and they see someone with a limp and a scar. So, and you can't, I'm not saying, I mean, we'd have to like get rid of every children's show made before today and even some made today.
Yeah.
If that was true, I mean, if that could, but
If
you
we were
can,
trying to eliminate that,
yeah, you can't do that. But if you watch the movie and there's a bad guy with a scar in the face, say, this bad guy has a scar, but not every bad guy has a scar. And just having a scar doesn't make you like pause the movie when those moments and do a little bit of teaching. The book, someone asked if I could repeat, the book that I read is called Disfigured: Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Meaning. And the quote is, the stories we tell are the reality we create.
Amen. Thank you for that. Question, do you know of what type of adaptive tech churches can use for folks? And maybe this is something we'll talk a little bit more about next week.
I think it really depends on what needs you're trying to meet. I can think of things like automatic captioning, like we have active on Zoom meetings. I can think of things like getting professional captioners if you're running events and operating a cart service so that people can have professionally made captions rather than just the AI ones. There are different kinds of technology that different people might use to communicate. I know that I, as a visually impaired person, usually have to have a lot of conversations about website accessibility and about how to format your worship bulletin so that it doesn't completely look ridiculous on my Braille device. So it just super depends. But I also think next week our wonderful colleague Helen may have some really great thoughts to share on that too.
Awesome. And somebody, I don't know if this is a direct answer now. I think Becca, you and I have had a conversation about this similar, but somebody did ask, is it possible, and this is for today's webinar and all of the webinars that we have in regards to accessibility, is it possible to activate the speech to text microphone in the group chat? Not having access to it excludes people with limited ability in their hands and or their fingers. And we have been, if you've seen me typing away online here, y'all, it's because my tech team and I have been trying to figure out an answer to that. And even Chris jumped on in the Q&A and said they don't think it's possible that voice to text is a Zoom feature. Becca, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so this I do think is a Zoom problem. It's because Zoom is using, your microphone, and I mean even though you're a participant on the webinar and it's not actually using your microphone, it thinks it's using your microphone, and so it won't let you activate your microphone for dictate purposes. Um, the best workaround I can think of at the moment is if you joined on a separate device and disconnected your audio. I think that would allow you to dictate into the chat box. I don't know that for sure. I should test that sometime. Um, but I know not everybody's just got two devices lying around that they can do that with. So I would say let's all write to Zoom about it, because yes, it is such an issue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for those real-time answers to the questions. And thank you all for the work that you do individually in your lives to love on people the way that you do collectively to help bring us along. So that way we can do this work together. It is scary to go alone, and it is scary to commit to saying, I am ready to sacrifice my comforts, whatever that comfort is that you're hanging on to that prevents you from getting involved in the justice work. But I guarantee that if we don't stand up, if we haven't yet, it's time. It's time for us to stand up and to take action into the things that we care about and to follow the lead of the people who are leaders like the folks here on our screen, right? And so thank you for your thought labor, your love labor, your emotional, personal, all of it. I am just so eternally grateful for each of you. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of those who are online and watching this live. We hope that you share it with others coming up. And thank you for crowdsourcing in the chat and the Q&A. It is such a gift to be in, like goosebumps, virtual community with you all. And of course, to our tech and media team for helping to make it possible today and in the re-watching of this, and for those background checks that we were doing. I hope that you join us back next week. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, there's lots more questions. I tell you what, y'all, for those of you who put questions into the Q&A, we're not going to have time today. If you email them to the invite that you got for this webinar, please go ahead and reply to the invite you got with your questions, and I will find out the answers for you. So my apologies for not getting to everything. But we do hope that you join us next week. We have two amazing webinars. On Monday, we finally have our rescheduled webinar from about a month ago. It just seems like so long ago at this point, but it's our What's Next? How Art Deepens and Enriches Worship in Divided Times with Reverend Salgado. And Reverend Salgado will share about their work in her congregation and what they have done to promote various forms of art and worship, from art shows to various worship series, whether it be the theology or Broadway, so on and so forth. So we're going to come together on Monday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss the practical ways to weave visual, musical, and creative expressions into the worship experience. And we're happy for that. We're happy that they were able to reschedule with us because I was ill. And then, of course, we're back with this amazing crew, same time on Thursday. I think we have one more person joining us next week. Pardon me, which I'm excited for. We're going to be talking in part 3 about what we've learned about disability, ableism, disability justice, and then discuss the ways to apply it in congregational contexts. We'll be able to talk a little bit about accessible to all, which is the A2A process within the UCC. We're going to talk about celebrating Access Sunday, although it is officially this Sunday. You can do it any Sunday, like I am next Sunday when I preach. And we'll have an introduction to disability theology. You will leave with concrete tools for helping your congregations undo the systems of ableism, to increase accessibility, and to celebrate disabled leadership and disability wisdom. So, beloveds, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Reverend Laura, for our benediction to take us out. Thank you, beloveds.
For our benediction today, let us live into Micah, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.